World mind. What is that? um, we romanticize this thing called the ego death. You know, this is, I'm sick of me, my limitations, my fear. So if you're going to die, something needs to take over, anyhow. And some people call that the collective consciousness. So if the world was going to awaken in humanity, there has to be a certain process or a pathway. There are many roads. There are so many pathways to spirit, to the awakening, to transformation. I think historically there have been these two. One is the monastic path. You become a priest, you become a monk, and you shut yourself away from the noisy world. And then there's the tantric path. It's to dive into the world and not escape it. This energy is interesting because there's some of this. There's definitely the party. But you're alone inside within the music. We're alone together. So it's up to you. It's going to be up to you. Do you go to Vipassana? Do you go to a monastery? Or do you go into the chaos? Or do you do both somehow? Because sometimes the more you take people into that, there's still a party. Because are you really a rock? Are you a stone? When you look at yourself through a microscope, you're moving. It's all dancing. So somehow the new meditation isn't going to be static. It's going to be very dynamic. And the more you have that, the more you actually access the other anyway. You know, the feminine is moving. The feminine is like, the masculine always wants to hold it down. Okay, stay there. Stop moving. Behave. So the first intention in the inner dance historically, and it's still the intention in much of the work around the world right now, is about why are we doing this? What is the point? What is making it happen? It's about shutting off the thinking process, turning off the mind. Yeah. Yes, it's recording. If that says, yeah. That's how it happens. Kundalini-wise, the literature says that when you stop the mind, which is called the systems of interpretation, when Kali or Shakti takes over Shava is on the ground in Shavasana. Kali Shakti comes through, the body begins to dance with the feminine. Inside the masculine, now he who channels her is called Shiva, the Lord of the dance. But what's actually creating the dance is Shakti. And traditionally we saw that as an eventuality of shutting down the system of interpretation. So when you think about it, okay, you lay down, you close your eyes. We're trying to find a way to circumvent the linear, sequential thinking process. All the techniques, no matter what you think about, like holding people's bodies, using the music, asking them to close their eyes, we're finding out that there are ways to shut down the thinking process. That was the first intention. That is not the only intention anymore, of course. So what did we find out about that? Globally, what we realized early on is we're actually reenacting the baby mind. We found a way, and we've been studying the baby mind, the actual baby mind, the nervous system, the cortical structures of the baby mind. We can actually recreate it. The baby brain has 100 billion neurons, and the adult has 50 billion. So going back to the origins of how much more did you have in infancy? You had twice more. And you lost those connections. To regain the connections, you have to become like a baby again. So now you look at the bodies. They're moving like babies. They're talking like babies. Because babies aren't stupid. Babies know more based on potentiality of how many connections are there. So there has been manifestations globally. It doesn't matter if it's in China, in Taiwan, so much, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and then into America, and then across Europe. Everyone's becoming like babies again. Isn't that the greatest gift? Okay, I'm tired. I want to make things new again. Can you give me another starting point? Baby. Neurologically, it could be explained by, I think more dimensionally, it's true. And you will have to ask these questions to yourself and to others in order to go into the heart of what that means. What did the world look like when you were one? And why don't you remember? Or when you first came out, why don't you remember? But what did the world look like? Was it 3D? What did the colors look like? The reason why you don't remember is memory functions didn't exist yet. You were not living in three-dimensional time and space. You just came from there. You know, you were floating, you were adventuring in the multiverse, and then bloop. Now they keep calling me the sound. That's supposed to be my name. So what did it look like before language, before memory? These are questions that would never grow old when you're holding the space. What did it look like before you were even there? You know, that's philosophical. What is time? What is space? That's what people are experiencing. That's what they're going through. They're going into a place where no time exists, where everything's happening all at once. You know that place because every single time you die, you go there. Every time you take a psychedelic, you go there. Every time you go into the dream state, you go there. You just don't remember because when you come here, you go back to that dimensionality. But every night, when you do fall asleep, when you're able to, you actually do go there. And the interesting thing is it's actually always there, no matter what's happening anyway. Even if you're in the office, taking care of kids. What we're interested in is not to drive people to go there. It's how to be in both at the same time. You could be doing your bank statement, you're still in the universe. You know, you could be driving your car and be careful. You can still be the universe. We're trying to find the bridge to allow the cosmic to hold more space because it did get tight, the space. You know, at night you do look at outer space, but inside there's inner space. And when you go there, there's actually no difference. So let's go a little bit into the science of what this is. So we're not looping, we're not generalizing. How do we actually know we're bringing people there? And as a practitioner, as a space holder, however you're going to apply this in your service, this may not seem to be necessary, this information, but you would be surprised that when you know about it, when you do start doing the work, it will matter. Okay? You don't need to literally touch people's brains. But even the smallest changes in the music will reroute the circuits. Any choice of sound, any part of the body you touch, you will send signals. And you will remanage the circuits. You will reroute circuits. So one of the first interesting things is aphasia. It doesn't have to be through light language, but there are people who are talking like babies and aliens. Do you guys know about this? Yeah. It's natural. It's always been there. It doesn't matter where in the world, but people go into this light language. But it's not just that. People stop talking. I've watched people stop talking for hours, days, weeks, or years. Because there's something about language that's really limiting and sequential. Like you can only talk about things one word at a time, and it's too slow for sometimes what wants to be transferred, conveyed. So one of the things that's happening is we're shutting down the language function. And you would want to get interested in what part of the brain actually manages language. So this is you. I don't like this program so much because it only shows the right brain. Okay, maybe let's look at another program. So one of the first things that you affect, let's talk about that. When you hold people, when you explode them, what do you affect? One of the first things that you affect is actually quite intangible. It's a space in between the brains. You have two brains, right? And they're kind of separate, but they're conjoined by certain structures, the most major of which is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum. Let's look at the corpus callosum. That's what it looks like. It's a bunch of nerve fibers that's connecting both brains. And when you expose people to certain stimuli, you will send electricity between both. And this is a big problem for some people, especially what they call epileptics, right? Certain times of the month, the moon, they hear certain sounds, they hear certain things, and then suddenly electricity begins to synchronize between the left and the right. Human beings somehow evolved the way we did because we had to separate the functions. Music exists here, language exists here. But when you have a seizure, which is a Kundalini rising, you actually don't have control when you're epileptic on sending the electricity between both pathways. So this gets affected. The corpus callosum is one of the main things that you activate that allows the masculine, the feminine, the left, the right, to start talking to each other. Because they're not always friends. You know, when you're doing accounting, when you're reading a book, usually you contralateralize them. You separate the functions. Many animals don't have lateralization. It's just one brain. The most primitive organisms just only had one brain. But we got smart and normally we're dominantly in the left. So something that's happening now is when you send so much energy across both brain regions, you begin to spread a lot of that electricity towards the other areas in the brain. So when people go into light language, what they're affecting is, number one, what's called the Broca's area, and that's responsible for speech production. So this needs a little bit of explanation as to, okay, why, how? This part of the brain that is responsible for making up the words, speaking the words, is also responsible for movement. So when people's bodies are moving in this way, you're actually also unlearning your language patterns, allowing you to become a baby again. In the work that we do, based on the first intentions of shutting down the thinking process. Very often, a lot of people have a hard time going back into speaking, into articulation, into linearity, because that's one of the first things that get affected. So that's one interesting thing. That's not the only part. What we're interested in when I bring this up is how do we bring about the range of experiences? That's the experimentation. Very often when people's bodies are moving, they don't actually receive insight. So when you go to the back of the brain, it's quite polar. That's called the occipital lobe. This is the frontal lobe. Speech production, control, logic, and motor functions are happening here. So the way you will handle the music, the way you hold people's bodies, you actually have control over what do you activate. That's what excites me. What a lot of people around the world are doing, I'm just going to play the music. I'm just going to touch whatever body part because that's what intuition will say. But if you want to go surgical, if you want to do surgery, if you want to develop a therapy where, okay, this person is not looking at something. They're just escaping, they're releasing. How do I allow them to see? So that's when the body actually stops moving. The energy moves towards here, and then boom. Next thing you know, they're traveling across memories, time and space, the universe. So this is what we're being given, that you can adopt different styles. You can have a toolbox with so many dimensions if you just learn how to map things out. That when people are being emotional, okay, it's here. When people are remembering, it's here. When people are seeing things, it's here. When people are sensing ants crawling, it's here. When people are feeling heat and cold, it's here. So you have control over how people will let go of control. It's not that you're controlling, it's just that you're widening the range of experience so that they can be all of it, not just one. You know, you would spread electricity through the whole brain, not just one part. That's what we're learning here, that they deserve the whole map. And you're not just going to focalize. But that a lot of techniques that had got passed on, it's actually very, very localizing. And you can see the history, why I had to speak about the history in this way. When I left the building in 2017, a lot of the practices were very movement-based. So I was speaking to some people the last days, and you know, there are these people, okay, you're not moving, you're blocked. Incorrect. That came from the old inner dance structures that were happening 2012. That's a long time ago. Inner dance is inner. And so we're finding out that, like in Palawan, we have people coming all the time. Their bodies are moving. And they're like, how come some people are like going there? And as soon as their body drops and it's not moving, suddenly, boom, they're traveling. They're in a spaceship or an airplane on the way to Egypt, on the way to Pluto. Because we're finding out how we can make it more, all of it, a generalized spread, basically. That's why the non-musicians here might get interested in becoming the cosmic DJs that you're interested in having access to. It doesn't need to be complex, but understanding the nature of the vibrations. You're like an artist, and here's your palette. You're going to put a bunch of vibrations together. And so now you take it slow. Maybe now you get a sense of where we need to bring the work. You need to bring several sciences together. There's entrainment at work. You can affect the brain by bringing in stimuli. But which stimuli? And then I bring up the analogy of the palette. How do you mix the colors? You know, from the beginning. For that, you need to make some of your own music. You can't just depend on other people's musics. you will at one point need to be an artist. It's about combination. How much can you combine? It's a big universe, but a starting point, and the combination will reflect on the brain. So as you access your music, you need to be, even in a basic way, a neurologist. You deserve to know more about this complex system that they say is more complex than the universe. I think in a spiritual context, it's not actually that complicated. It's beautiful, this thing. So I'm going to admit to you, I'm in love with the brain. I'm so in love with the brain. Because for me, the brain is a song. The hardest part of the brain is connected to the autonomic nervous system. I'm interested in the song. How harmony, consonance, how rhythm, how pulse, how melody is actually here. Like for me, music is a creation of the brain. It helps us to organize emotions, mood, so many different functions. So when you bring all of these elements that are in the song and you're able to translate that into the neurological, I think you can do anything. You can actually do anything. You can set almost any context, anywhere, and so much is possible. So going back to the baby brain or light language brain, this is key. And when you bring these things up, aphasia is a word. Aphasia is a medical problem where people don't know how to talk. They lose their language. And then there are different kinds. Broca's area is in the front. And when people get affected in Broca's area, that's when they can't express what they want to say. Like, okay, I want to say, I'm hungry. But you end up just saying a sound, or you keep looping around the same word. You lose the power of naming things. But that's not the only aphasia. There is this thing called Wernicke's aphasia. There's a part of the brain here called the Wernicke's area, and it's very near the auditory cortex. And when that happens, a lot of you probably have seen this in the process. People are speaking and you're like, or they're like, okay, I don't understand what they're saying. They're putting letters and words and sentences together and they're just sounds. That's because you brought so much electricity here. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's either you put so much electricity here in the front, which is near the motor cortex, or here's the auditory cortex. Here's where you understand what people are saying, and here's where you can say what you want. So some people get affected here. They're like, I don't understand. I don't connect the words. That's a baby. Or here, say, oh, yeah, you're going into the light language thing. And some people, they affect both. So these are your choices. Let's see what that, so we talked about the corpus callosum that connects the left and the right. When they studied the brains of musicians like Benjamin and Matt, they not only have a thicker corpus callosum, musicians, they have a thicker arcuate fasciculus. These are the nerve fibers connecting the Wernicke's and the Broca's area, the thing that's connecting language production and language comprehension. Because when they just keep exposing themselves to vibration, sound, the electricity keeps passing through. And there's recognition as to what the sound means and what the sound expresses. So when you ask people to lay down, I'm just helping you visualize what's happening. When people lay down, you're sending electricity through these. That's one explanation. You will thicken that. If people understood this, including doctors and teachers, they would feel safer. It's okay, because we understand that when people become like babies, they actually have more brain power and capacity to learn more. Because babies and small children, they learn a lot more than adults. Okay, this would be the main topic, and we'll take it slow. I don't think we need to go so deep yet at this point. But you would need to develop a vocabulary on your vibrations, depending if you're having an argument, you're conducting a business deal, you're cleaning the house. What's your brain state? We do have a portable EEG here. So in the next days, we can do some experimentations on what are the conditions that bring people into certain brain states. So this looks interesting, it looks simple, but also we don't get it. It's hard to understand because all of these waves are combinations of waves, right? Like when you're awake and when you're asleep, these are all stages. These are all combinations of things. So any facilitator or space holder that's experimenting with music and getting people to lay down, this is your bread and butter. This is your palette. This is your work. You're bringing changes through sequence and through simultaneities. You know, certain times you're bringing many sounds together. Sometimes you're simplifying them, allowing them to go into different stages. So obviously, dreams would be important. We would want to understand, how do you dream? Did you forget to dream? How do you remember to dream? And without looping on the word dream, when you're dreaming, what is actually happening? And then compare that to the inner dance or to the journey. How does that compare? What is the difference between going into the mystical dream world and then when you're doing inner dance? Is it exactly the same or is it different? It's the same, but it's different. And there are many types of dreams. So a lot of people say you're not dreaming in non-REM. That's not actually true. There are journeys that you can take people into that's REM or non-REM. Non-REM is supposedly when your eyes are not moving and when you're not dreaming, but that's not true. The dreams in non-REM is actually a lot deeper than REM. The memories that you access will not be the recognizable linear dreams that you remember often, that has stories, that has sequences. Like mappings like these would be really powerful. We keep looking at these, that every time you go to sleep, you go into different journeys. You know what this says is you have 5 inner dance journeys every night because you have 5 cycles. And when you compare the cycles, there are differences. We'll look at different maps. So this is not supposed to make sense yet to you because we haven't unpacked what exactly is in some of these stages. People who do long processes, they're taking people more into something closer to the 5th cycle. And okay, it's my first time, it's my second time, that's maybe a first cycle. What's actually the difference? Okay. I'm taking a breath before I go into this. Excitatory pathways are also addiction pathways. We have to be honest that the first thing that usually gets activated in the process taps into the mesolimbic, dopaminergic, or glutamatergic pathway. Dopamine, glutamate. These are excitatory and they're very powerful. They will get you high. So those are good, but they can be quite limiting when people get stuck there. Okay, super fast, but super temporary. Get me? You can change the brain fast, but the effects are not going to last. They can feel it for a couple of hours or a couple of days, but there are other mechanisms that allow the energy to also help to inhibit and to slow down. What's interesting about this is when you keep using dopamine and glutamate, it will inhibit the learning process. So going back to this whole point about becoming a baby, if you do certain things too much, people will stay babies. I know this through experience even in myself. If I didn't have certain disciplines to come out of the chaos, I actually would have dumbed myself down. And what's dangerous there is ego. Ego could come in. And so when people don't study, when they're just in the pure experience, like you will see massive amounts of ego in the world coming through the practice. Because when the main activations are motoric, when we're making people's bodies move and making them just cry and scream and go through that, a lot of what's being tapped into is dopaminergic and glutamatergic. It's excitatory, and too much of that will poison the body. So learning, like growing up, learning to activate the mind even as you're shutting off a certain aspect of the thinking process means you also need to inhibit even as you stimulate. So spirituality will be the next addiction. That's good. That's okay. Because it will be a better addiction compared to the other ones. It's an opening. But then we need to counteract that with the balancing out elements. That would be really interesting as well. That could be applicable in the non-spiritual areas. This needs to be talked about around the world. We need to prepare for these conversations because the information is actually quite deep. It's complex. It's very difficult because there's a lot of paradoxes in the body. That the moment you stimulate something, something will turn off. And then the more you try to turn that on, something will, they just keep going like this. It's really quite hard to achieve that balance. So when you want long-term, sustainable, stable ground, you would need to also not just work with the nervous system. You would need to bring this down to the endocrine system and the exocrine system. The endocrine system would be the glands. So this is circuitry. This is electricity. But that's not enough. You also need to access chemistry. Circuitry, and then the glands is chemical. All of these are signals spreading across many pathways, and however much it seems complex, it's actually quite simple because there are only a few parts of the brain or the body that manages them all. So when you know what the master system is, that's your trick. Find the master system. Find the boss. Find the executive governor that manages all of them. So the good news is not only are you easily pressing an addiction, there are certain parts of the brain, and they're very hidden. They're here. They're somewhere inside. Okay, wait. It's not going bigger. It's somewhere here. I think it should be behind here. There's somewhere here. It's that tiny. What you want to touch is like a tiny almond-sized thing that manages the whole thing. If you find that, that is what manages time and space. That's called the hypothalamus. I would love for you to understand the hypothalamus. People normally think of it as the body clock. It manages the rhythms, and it's very easily affected by the music, by the rhythm. It helps you to synchronize. And if you can hold a space for that one small thing, it will manage everything else. The pituitary, the thyroid, the adrenal system. It will manage the whole cortex, all the lobes, the parietal, the frontal. So the good news is the work that we do instantly goes there. That's actually what brings simplicity to this. Do you understand what I'm saying? We just happen to accidentally find a way to access that one thing that manages everything else. That's why we need the context, because it gives permission for everyone to mess things up, because something's holding all of it in place. It's very old, it's very small, and it's the bridge between the old brain and the new brain, the animal and the alien are being bridged by this one small thing. And if you can manage that, emotions, breath rate, heart rate, cardiac volume, temperature, pain, intelligence, all of it, every single one of those are manageable by that one thing. So now you would change the literature. It's not just about the activation. It's not just about lighting things up, making things explode. Okay, here's something new. It's still part of the substantiation as to why is it happening, and it's still part of the why are people becoming like babies? How are we able to bring them into like simplicity, purity, basic goodness? How do you link the old brain and the new brain? And then how do you delink them? It's actually quite simple. It has something to do with memory and maps. So when your eyes are open, let's say, okay, I'm coming into Finland, to the countryside, I'm riding the trains, I'm going here to this beautiful area here. Your eyes are open, you're smelling everything, you're hearing sounds. Now you need a new place in your brain for that, and it's going to be a cluster of neurons in your map. Everything you have seen are mapped out somewhere there, inside. They're all inside. Everywhere you've been to, everything you've seen, everything you've heard, it's inside. It's all mapped out. So when someone asks you to go into the middle of the room and close your eyes, the eyes have the biggest responsibility in mapping out where are you right now. Where are you? So when you close your eyes and then other stimuli come through, you activate all the other parts that's responsible for mapping out things. What you're doing is you're demapping the brain. Okay? So this has some complex material in relation to what's called place cells and grid cells. So everything that you sense, it's mapping out, okay, I'm safe here. I'm okay, it's not too painful. It's nice, it's yummy. I like him, I like her, she's cool. That's interesting. All of these help you to situate yourself, like I'm here. I'm somewhere here. So a large part of the awakening process for many seems to be, no, you're not here. You're everywhere. So one of the techniques is to simply ask someone to close their eyes and to lay down. When you go horizontal, when you were vertical, you go horizontal, and when you close your eyes, you're already cutting the cord. I say, okay, I'm not actually here. So we want to understand the different ways in which you don't like your map always. Okay, this map is too stable. I keep going to that place and my neurons are so wired. They're too wired, that's all I know. I need to ride another airplane. I need to go talk to some other people. So the more stimuli, the more diversity, the more you travel, inside and outside. That's how you change things. Because anyone who's exposed to the same thing over and over again, and some of you call this close-minded people, it's because they're too wired with the same connections, and their eyes are always open. They're always mapping themselves in the same space. So what you want to study now is how the map works. The map works in the past. We thought that what was the most responsible for the map is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for memory. And attached to that is called the entorhinal cortex. But what people are realizing is, and this is very recent, the whole map isn't actually just in the hippocampus, it's in the whole cortex. So a part of what you're doing is you're displacing people because you're too much in place. Okay, maybe there's a problem. Maybe there's like a stuckness. They're too rooted in the place. So if you want some kind of change to happen, you need to displace people. So sometimes, okay, you touch them a little bit here. And so their mind that was so here, okay, it starts to travel. Okay, now I'm there. But you do something where now they're there. They're all the way there. A lot of it has to do with location, position. Proprioception is about how do you position your awareness according to how your body is shaped. That's why yoga had to become a thing. Because when you reshape the body, you reshape the mind. But this is a lot bigger. When you displace the location, you can change the shape. Okay, what's your shape? Are you too square? Are you a circle? Or are you something you've never seen before? So isn't that interesting? Okay, the possibilities are endless. Okay, I'm gonna reshape this. What can I do? What can I use? So many tools on reshaping. So now what people are realizing is every single cortical, you have so many of these place cells and grid cells. Like simply touching this, you're locating yourself. I'm not looking at it, but all of these fingers touching this, I'm predicting what's there. You're always predicting. You're always shaping. Where am I now? And you're doing it unconsciously. You're walking around. So what people are in fact studying around the world is about that, breaking the connections in the mapping structure so that the new connections would happen. And because of climate change, we don't want people to necessarily travel outside. We're helping them to travel inside so that there would be neuroplasticity. There would be, it's becoming more and more evident that around the world, people are actually losing plasticity. People, even in their teenage years, they're not changing the brain after a certain point. They're literally saying, okay, I know everything anymore. Don't teach me. Don't talk to me. Okay, I don't want to listen. We're using media in certain ways that's changing but not changing. It's creating too much identity, too much, okay, this is me. I'm protecting my space. So we're learning how to open up that mapping. The work that we do is part of that. Reshaping. Okay, so just basic. set of questions. When people experience, like I said, they will have questions. And when there are questions, there are also answers, aka insights. You're always receiving insights, okay? That's not always going to come from what you know. The more you realize you don't know everything, humanity knows, the universe knows. Anyone you expose yourself to will change you. That's why you want to be careful about who you're going to be around. And you want to take care that when you're around them, that you take care that what you give them is more than what they know and more than what you know. Because you're constantly learning. You're taking responsibility. What does the species know? You know, what does the earth gone through? So the languaging is really important. And what's been happening in the spiritual communities the last decades is people are shopping for what's the best language. You know, okay, do I go American Indian? Do I go Indian? Do I go Chinese traditions? They're hopping around. They're shopping for what's the best New Age, what's the best spiritual languaging. You know, neo-religious. But now a lot of people are interested in what is more universal, that's not going to shop, but would last no matter where I go in the world. So the deepest philosophical inquiry has to do with causality, causation. What makes things happen? You know, what determines creation? So no matter where you look, if you just keep tracing the deepest questions, causation would be one of the deepest philosophical inquiries. And according to Aristotle, who first looked at this, there are 4 causes. So let's say you're talking about the human or the energy. Let's say starting point, okay, inner dance. Material cause would be, what is it made of? What's the substance? A formal cause would be, what's the design? That's different. As to, okay, what is it made of, but how was it structured? The final cause would be, what is it for? Why is it in the world? What is its purpose? And that could apply to you. What am I made of? Where am I coming from? What's my point? Why am I here? The efficient cause would be, where is it coming from? And what are the agents that allow it to be created? I just bring this up because it would be an interesting starting point for you to understand your own questions. Why are you here? Are you interested more in where is this coming from? How is it structured? Whether it be the energy or your own mind, your own brain. Where is this all going? And most complex is, what is the design? What is the intricacy? What is the sophistication of, what is the architecture? You know, what is the interior design? And am I happy with it? You know? So that was just a one circle. Time check. The other ones are smaller. Let's start with the inner dance as an experience. What is happening? Some of the there are many interesting things, but when you have had 20 years to look at this, in my part, how do I define it? One of the most repetitive and universal would have to do with what is time and what is happening in time when it comes to this energy. It has to do with something called retro-causality. Somehow time isn't going forward anymore, it's going backwards. That doesn't make sense in any way of explaining that. But those who have a sense of synchronicity, intuition and connection, trust, you have this ability of making time go backwards. The usual Awareness that time is going backwards is I know something before it happened. I don't know why I need to go there. I don't know why I need to talk to you. But there's something there that I'm already aware of. And it's just a formality of putting myself in that location and in that moment for that thing that's already happened to just happen. Because it's done. Even before it happened, it's done. That is retrocausality. And there are physics to retrocausality. There are neurologies to retrocausality. It has something to do with electricity and magnetism. It has something to do with time and space. So when you raise the vibration, the world doesn't have as much power over you. You have more power over the world. You can actually control the world if you know how to balance these dualities. And one of the things that would show up is retrocausality. So in the energy, no matter how you have experienced it, it's like there's something about your body that just goes there. You don't give instructions to it. It just knows where to go. And it doesn't mean you don't know it. It's just the body knows sometimes a lot more than the mind does when you're not filtering. So what happens is effects come before the cause. The whole of Western philosophy is about causation, where if you do this, this is going to happen. If you ask this question, this answer will come up. In a retrocausal universe, the answer would come even before you ask the question. Because the question is actually an answer, hiding as a question. It's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of how you look at things. So the effects will come before the cause. And the part of the universe where this is always happening is the black hole. In the black hole, time is so weird that time is always running backwards. Like a second here on Earth is maybe 1,000 years in a black hole. Time is super dense. You don't need to go to the black hole is inside you. So sometimes when you dream and the dream seems so massive, that's you going into another time. Yeah, it's like, wow, that was so much. Could be people's psychedelic experiences. It could be the journey. Like, that was not an hour. So I've been sitting with this for a long time. People saying, I went to the earth. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I just went to the earth. I went to the beginning of the earth. And then I went back here and I saw everything in between. Like, wow, all of that in an hour? Why not, right? But you hear these stories of people experiencing this in different ways anyway. And sometimes that ends up getting people into trouble. That sometimes people are in psychiatric situations, insane asylums, because they've been doing that. And we haven't built safe space. In many cultures, people would put you into a pedestal. When you do that, you're a saint. You are yogic, you're a shaman. But a lot of you live in many parts of the earth that when this happens, we need to lock you up because you're supposed to just be here as one person living this one day. So if you want to be a philosopher, you want to ask, what is the nature of time? What is time? And time is actually a perception. So you take something, you get entrained by, like it will shift you. So now we realize certain sounds will shift time. Certain body positions will shift time. Certain words, certain energies, your own vibration will shift time. You take in certain foods, you'll shift time. The temperature or climate changes, you'll shift time. Go to a warmer place, what is time like? Go to a colder place, what is your perception of time? Time is all about speed. Is it slowing down or is it speeding up? Now, you're not here to be judgmental where one thing is better than the other. The techniques you're holding is actually to hold both. That's called a sauna. Hold it super hot and the super cold. Through your words, through your sound, through your touch, and you would have made it. You're constantly in the REM state. You're holding the old and the new together. That's what we're learning. In the past, you need to be insane to do that. You had to be like an artist, you had to be a creative person or a shaman. But my take on this is humans everywhere are actually just going there now. We just got exposed to all of it. The stimulating and the inhibiting, the slow and the fast are now in the vocabularization of humans all across the world. So it's happening. Another view of time and space. So if we're going to talk about that, then we need to talk about this. Like we already talked about the maps. Why are we even here? What is it? Yeah, it's about time and space. So there's this paradoxical thing, and it's not always easy as well to hold. You would need to have many rooms in your house. And when you hold space for others, you'll do the same. Whatever you say will hold the context, and that will be the journey. So very often, when you go into the developmental, what you're talking about is subjective. The person is important. The person is valuable. The person needs to be held. You know, your story is not something we'll cancel out. But sometimes it's not going to be developmental. It's going to be evolutionary. Sometimes people need to access what's beyond the person, because the person's capacities are actually quite just personal and subjective. Sometimes they need to access humanity. So what I'm saying here is, depending on what words you use, that's where people will go. And I've realized this over and over again. If you go into the emotional, you go into the story, people will go there. And the music that you would use, the way you touch them, will be according to that choice. I'm going to go into the stages of the human. But when you learn to talk about the earth, evolution, the planet, Gaia, the mother, you bring that up, they will go there. And then when you talk about the cosmos, the universe, they would go there. So depending on who you are and what you would want people to remember, they will either go back to the womb. A lot of people, when they go into deep space and deep time, they go into the womb, say, oh, I went back to the mother. But some people, they say, I didn't go into the womb, I went to the earth. Depending on how you hold context, make a choice. But don't invalidate the other, because they are both part of us. So maybe you can see why I'm bringing that up. These sound really basic, but when you're there, it will be really useful. Because they just open up to so many other things. But you need to know, where do they begin to diverge. Okay, so when you do open up a school, and this is going to be a bona fide school, where people really want to understand what this is, what you need to develop is cross-conceptual thinking. That when you want to understand something, it's eventually going to link into something else, and it's going to link into something else. And you want to ask if you deserve that, and if your people deserve that. Cross-conceptual thinking in the cognitive sciences look like this. If you want to understand something about the mind, the brain has something to do with it. So does language, so does culture, so does spirit is in philosophy, so does society. So they're already bridging these connections, that the more you want to understand something, you would see the answers actually in another department. So what we're doing is we're asking this mapping to include this as a technology. And there's so many insights here that's not represented yet. So we need to talk to the scientists here, 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 and then say, okay, we're here. We have some things here that's been happening. and we have some things here. And then the scientists are going to become spiritual, and the spiritual people are going to become scientific too. A new science will come about from the spiritual experience that will not always look like science. But we will be part of this conversation. And that's called structuralism. That's a movement that's been there for a while now, that there were so many things we couldn't understand just by looking at the subconscious about the unknown. But we realized that they just needed to talk to each other. The universe in the university, the departments weren't talking to each other. The school isn't out there. It's in your own experiences about the world that needs to bridge. It's not always going to be about what is it about the people, around the people. It's like what is inside the people. Sometimes people are like so focused on how many people. No, don't start with that. Build on what's the capacity inside one person. How much. Some people are actually using 3%. They're lucky at 6%. But when you see people going there, that's okay. That's maybe 10%. That's maybe 20%. If you add capacity even in just one body, they will naturally just go out there and reflect that. That's what it means to start as a baby and then to grow up. Make them babies again, shwook, and then get them to grow up. How does the earth grow like the earth? How does the sun grow? Grow like the sun. Give them the support mechanism that allows them to make the connections. Because the moment there is self-awareness or metacognition, consciousness is becoming conscious of itself, it will all just accelerate. So all that I'm doing is I'm putting words into all the experiences that are happening out there. They're my words. There could be other words. But this is what's been happening in the inner dance for many years now. So going back to this, a lot of the notes that I would be bringing up would have to do with these. In some trainings, we would ask, are you okay with this? Is this where you want to go? But at this point, you may not have a choice. You may need to at least go with what's being organized and coordinated. It took me about not a month and a half, but 2 months, even just to prepare for this one training. I want you to understand that I'm not showing up, so that when you don't see me at meals, I don't talk about anything I don't understand. If I'm going to bring it up, it's because I can back it. If I make a statement, it's a knowledge claim. And when I speak about it, it's not coming from my ego. It's to contribute to a peer-to-peer understanding globally with an open source. I'm not economizing this. It's to offer it to humanity so that we can, I'm not building a small box where this is mine, don't come near, I'm the best, this is the greatest. We're opening the box. So there really is like a lot more here. I think one more important thing to say is you're allowed to make things up. There's so much that you can do that's about what you're learning from everything else that you're studying or have ever studied. Don't throw those away. And then what you can come up with. Do that. Like an artist, like a child, go and play. So when you relate to someone like me, or me per se, what I can offer is what would you not have to reinvent that's out there that holds a lot of complexity. So it's not because I'm better, I'm wiser, it's because I had the time. I had 20 years of research in order for you not to have to read too much. You can access a lot of this in a way that's compounded. You don't need to go to medical school. You don't need to go into neurology. You don't need to. And then we open up the space, again, within the studio or laboratory, with like music producers, musicians, with other types of practitioners. This is quite new. It's really hard to put into words, but I think we need a laboratory. Once you take in the insights, what you want to do as a researcher, not just as a healer, is to learn how to build certain experimental models. Like, what are you interested in? Like talking to Joanna, okay, she's working with the oils, with the scents. What would that do to a brain state, along with like the music? In the schools in the Philippines, we're not asking the children to lay down. They can be sitting up, their eyes can be closed, they can be doing art, but the music is in the background and they're still going there. So there's different experimentations that you can actually conduct now. And some of you might need to collaborate with people you don't know and people you know, who are already there in your communities. People who have access to the sciences, spending time with the music people, the producers, the musicians. We're actually honoring them because their arcuate fasciculus and their corpus callosum is thicker. If you ask people to lay down, their nerve tracts are going to thicken, even if they're non-musicians, so that they can build more connections. But they know the structures. They can help to engineer. But a lot of them aren't caught up. We need to talk to the DJs and tell them, okay, you're doing what you're doing, but what if we ask people to lay down? What would the rave be like? They're so near. They know the structures, but they don't know the power of the music. So we need to change the industry. Next month, we're actually talking to one of the biggest music corporations in the world, talking to the CEO and the engineers. It's called Roland Corporation. And they're like, that's in Belgium. And they're pretty much interested in the conversation, where's music going? Where's the next music going? So now we're needing to build new devices that yoga teachers, that doctors, the teachers can handle without too many of the knobs and get them to access those states of genius. Because music is not music anymore in that way. That's collaborate. That's the spirit of collaboration, you know. So I think this is quite new to us. We're having to shift the inner dance community into this greater level of conversation. On my part, I said this a couple of years ago. I need help. So I would tell this to you now. I need your help. I think this energy needs help. I don't want to be the source. I don't want to be the strong one or the big one. I just want to keep on doing what I'm doing, and then I would like you to do what you would do, that you're already doing or would do more. And we're here to support. Whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to make of this, that's how I would like you to see me or see us. I would like this to be new again. And a lot of what I've seen, I'm interested in, what could be more. So we have instruments, we have many tools. So the next few days, you can see, okay, this is being talked about, but I want to see now. I want to put that to the test. That's what happens when you vocabularize, when you hear certain things. For you to get to know more of that, you actually need to put the units together. That's when you play. Okay, I saw this. I hear that. Okay, but what happens if I put that and that together? So we are going to reverse engineer. In the beginning in inner dance, in the music, for example, what I did was I just put a bunch of songs together. Later, the science showed up. According to the circadian rhythms and the sleep stages, where I understood why I was doing things, but in the beginning, I just put them together. And yet, people with cancer were getting healed. People with emotional problems were, all kinds of problems were going away. So that was like the whole thing just worked on its own. But then I saw the problems that I wasn't able to understand, so I had to reverse engineer. But reverse engineer at this point would be like dissecting. How can I explain reverse engineering? A lot of you know what it is, but as a child, this is what I would do. I'd get the toy that I just got from Christmas. Oh, it's nice. So what I do is I'd smash it open because I wanted to see how it was put together. So when it comes to this energy, I want you to do the same. I want you to take the thing and then do that and smash it open. Okay, what is it made of? So instead of using too much complex things put together, I'd like us to start with really basic waveforms, really basic frequencies, basic rhythms, and taking these super highly intense, sensitive, amazing bodies. You guys are the laboratories. I want to see what would happen if you experienced a square wave or a triangle wave or a certain smell. That's reverse engineering at this point, so that you don't get overwhelmed as to creating so much music. I want you to be a surgeon or a scientist. I don't also want you to be focused on, okay, I want to experience what if nothing happens to me. That's boring. It doesn't actually do much, and it will trap you into thinking about that when you hold space for others. People get to a point where, okay, nothing's happening. Something's always happening. No matter what, something's always happening. We're just not always aware. So reverse engineering is a way, no matter how powerful you are, you don't want to paint yourself into a corner. You don't want to imprison yourself into always promising, okay, this is going to do something. Something's always happening and you're always contributing to that. So to be like a scientist or a surgeon, a researcher, just be interested in people's brains. Just be interested in people's vibrations and waves, and develop really inclusive, slow tools to see that something's always happening. Developing a kind of structure that would help you to work with even with the most basic parts of the world that will not allow intensities to be the opening point. But also being able to do magical, intense things. But if you want to scale, right? If you want this to really scale strong, it needs also to speak to the parent and to the, let's say, the cancer doctors and the most conservative, 70-year-old woman who's a sweet old grandmother. How do you do something there? Reverse engineering.